Hi, my name is Jack Wallen, and I am here to talk to you about something. What is that something? You probably ask yourself, rhetorically or not. Well, the other night I was working on the sixth book in the Violent Delight series, Violent Delights, Deadly Departed. Based on the name of the book, you could probably assume a few things about that entry in the series. Probably the first assumption would be that it's the last book in the series. Deadly Departed. Yeah. So I'm riding along, writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And then all of a sudden, my brain and my fingers wrote something that I wasn't expected. And I said, no, don't go there. Don't do it. And my fingers kept typing, no, don't go there. My fingers keep typing, no, I said don't. Fingers keep typing, fine. You went there. You went there and there isn't squadoosh I could do. Well, actually, there is something I could do. I could hit the old delete button, but delete, 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 delete. Get rid of it all and scrap it and start over. Not completely start over, but start over where my fingers and my brain decided to take that little sidetrack. So let me explain a little bit about the sidetrack that my brain decided to take. I knew going into this book, I knew exactly, not exactly, but I knew what was going to happen. I knew the gist of the story. I knew where it was going to end. I knew how it was going to end. And I was happy with the way it was going to end. The end was going to be literally the end. I was going to be done with the series. And it's not that I have really enjoyed writing this series. I love the characters. I love how the whole thing is played out. I love the storyline. But at the same time, there was something inside of me that was ready to move on to something else. And I know what that other something else is that I want to move on to. Actually, there are two different something else that I'm going to adventure into. One of them is the 1950s horror series. And then there's another one-off book that I want to write in honor of my father, who passed away about 7 years ago. And I came up with this idea one day. I was on the rowing machine doing my thing, and the idea popped in my head. And I'm not going to give anything away because this is a really cool idea. But the idea for the book popped into my head, and I said, I have to write that. I have to write that for if for any other reason than to honor my father, who was a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I'm probably going to write that next, because what I'm thinking is that I will either write that next and then I'll go into the 1950s horror series, or I'm going to come back to Violent Delights. However, there's always an however. If I come back to Violent Delights based on this little happy accident that my brain and my fingers decided to get into cahoots about, it's going to be a very different series at that point. In fact, while I was just out for a run about 30 minutes ago, I decided that, okay, so Violent Delights books 1 through 6 are third person past tense. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to write the second series, or the spin-off series, whatever it ends up being, from the point of view of the person who was central to this happy accident? Not going to give anything else away. Sorry about that. And I thought, that's really cool, because number one, I love writing in first person past tense. I always find it to be really immediate, visceral, and it allows you to get deep inside the machinations of the character. And it's especially good for writing from the perspective of the bad guy, because the bad guys don't usually get that treatment. And I thought, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I think it will be a really cool departure from the 6 books that I've already written in this series. And I'm fairly certain my publisher will go for it because the next books in the series, the first 6 books were for the most part somewhat not kind, but they were, other than the sex, they were very subtle and gentle in my handling of the whole crime thriller thing. If I do this next series based on this first series, it's going to be kind of brutal. It has to be based on what happens in the 6th book. And if you're reading the series and when you get to the 6th book, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, why do I want to talk about this? Why do I bring this subject up to you? Especially those of you who aren't reading the Violent Delight series. Shame on you. You should be reading it. I believe, as an artist, as both a writer and an actor, I believe to my core that we should never box in our art. We should not approach a piece of work, no matter what it is, with the attitude that we know everything about this piece of art, that we know exactly what's going to happen to it, how it's going to turn out, what it's going to look like and sound like and feel like when we're done. I think that is, generally speaking, I think that is doing a disservice to our craft because, and I believe this 300,000 bajillion godzillion %, that our instinct and impulses are better at crafting and guiding our art than our minds. Our minds know how to create the building blocks for the art. But our instincts and impulses know how best to put those blocks together. And if we, as artists, if we create all the building blocks for this piece of art that we're creating, and then we mentally and intellectually put those blocks together in the way that we are fairly certain is the best route to get from point A to point X, Z, whichever is the end point you have there. I know my alphabet, I really do. If you use your intellect to put those blocks together, you may not come up with the best product, the best piece of art, the best outcome. If, however, you intellectually create all these blocks, and then you let your instinct and your impulses put those blocks together in the most natural way they can be, whatever it is that you create is going to be better for it. That's how I approach every piece of art that I do, every role, every book, everything. For example, my wife and I were talking about the read-through of Me and My Muse, and we were talking about, she listened in, she wasn't in the same room because we did the read-through at the house, she was listening in, and she made some comments about the various states of character and at the read-through. And I said, well, one of the things you have to understand is that, and this is how I work for every role. Prior to the read-through, I will have made a number of choices for the character. Sometimes really bold choices, sometimes subtle choices, sometimes somewhere in between, but I make choices for that character. I bring those choices in so that I have all of the building blocks already created for the character. I haven't put them together yet because I believe that putting them together prior to rehearsal is detrimental to the character, to the evolution of the character. So I come into those read-throughs with the building blocks already there. And then I do the thing that I do. I actively listen to other people that are talking to me, and I allow my instincts and impulses to start to jigsaw those building blocks together in the most natural way they should be for that character. And I do the same thing for every book I write. Before I start writing, like if this is a one-off book, just a one-off book, not a series, before I start writing that book, I have an idea of what the story's about. I don't have any details about the story. I just have the kernel of the idea. And then I have an idea of who the main characters are, protagonist and antagonist. And there might be some incidental things that I bring to the table before I start writing. For example, in the Violent Delight series, the things that I knew going into it were that there was going to be a parallel between the protagonist lovers and the antagonist lovers. What that parallel was, I didn't know. I just knew that there was going to be a parallel, that they were going to be like two sides of the same coin. And then I let it play out naturally, how it was supposed to play out. And the same thing happened with this incident the other night when I was writing. Again, not going to give you any details of it because read it. They solved the big problem, or the big problem solved itself in the previous book. So in the last book, I knew what the new problem was going to be that could be kind of sandboxed in this one book. So it was this new problem was isolated to just this one entry, and it was going to come about and be solved in this one entry. And this whole book was going to serve as the denouement for the whole series. This was going to be the resolution. And at the very end, I knew there was going to be a wedding. So I hit about halfway, and I threw in this wrench, where all of a sudden the sixth book is starting to resolve everything, and then a curveball was thrown into it to say, are you really done with this series or not? Because if you aren't done with this series, this is how you continue it on. If you are done with this series, then you just let that be a catalyst for this other thing. Either way, it works. But as is with many of the books that I write, when those happy accidents happen, I just let them be. I just go with them. I let it flow. Because my brain, as creative as my brain is, it's not always going to be able to come up with those kinds of plot points when they happen naturally. Because when I can't predict what is going to happen in a book, even as the writer, if I can't predict it, that means that the readers are not going to predict it. And there's no way anybody reading this book at the end of this series would have predicted this happens. But when they read that, they're probably going to say, oh, this series might continue on. Maybe as is, maybe in a different form, I don't know. But it can. Now, if I would have blocked all of this stuff out, if I would have not only created all the building blocks for the story, but mentally put them together, intellectually put them together the way I thought they should be, that accident would not have happened. And those accidents are some of the best plot points you'll ever have. It happened to me, I can't remember which one it was, but it happened to me during the iZombie series. When I was riding along, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this left turn happened. And I was like, what? What the what? Do I really want to go there? Do I want this to happen in this series? And I said, the universe is telling me to do it, so let's do it. I know you have it in you. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I know that every artist listening to this, not, it doesn't have to just be artists, this can apply to anybody. You could be, just for example, and I've watched this happen to my wife before. She's in the kitchen, and I'm not stereotyping here because we both use the kitchen. I often do the dishes, and she will cook. She's an incredible baker. When she cooks, she cooks by instinct, and she'll be cooking along, making something, and then a little happy accident will happen with whatever she's making. And instead of trying to fix that, she'll roll with it. And in the end, what happens is she's created something new. And that's really the crux of this. It's all about creating something new. It's all about creating something that you might not otherwise have known you could create, but by accident you did. And if you roll with it, what happens after that accident is going to make everything even better. So you've got to let your art be what it wants to be. Don't confine it. Don't tell your art what it needs to be. Let it tell you. Let your art, let your craft be the guide. And if you do that, you will be creating more original stories that are more compelling, more dimensional, and your readers will love it. If you're an actor and you're in rehearsal and you have one of those happy accidents, don't look at it as a mistake. Work with it. I cannot tell you how many times that's happened to me. I mentioned it once before, several months ago, about the whole Our Country's Good incident, where my impulses were to rip the pages out of the Bible. And I stopped myself. The director said, do it. And it wound up being one of the most powerful moments in the show. Let your art be what it wants to be, what it needs to be. Trust your craft, trust your instincts, trust yourself. You've been doing this for a long time. You know what you're doing. And if you haven't been doing this for a long time, you still should trust your instincts, because your instincts are going to create some marvelous art. We'll see what happens with this series. I haven't broached the subject with my publisher yet, but I'm fairly certain they will like the idea. In fact, I'm going to go upstairs now and send a message to my publisher, say, hey, I have this idea, or this idea accidentally happened. What do you think? Now, I know that the publisher was really excited about me jumping into the 1950s horror series, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. One way or t'other, I'm going to allow this series to continue. Whether it happens immediately, whether it happens later on, I don't know. I might want to step back, give myself a little space from what I've written so far, so I can kind of get a breath of fresh air and approach it in a few months from now with a new perspective. Because I always find, and I believe this so strongly, that every time you write a book, every time you perform a role, every time you write a song, every time you direct a show, every time whatever, you are better for doing it. You will have learned something that you can apply to the next time you do that thing. You should always understand that when you're working your art, when you're doing your craft, you are not just doing something to complete it. You're doing something to improve yourself, to expand your horizons, as it were. Expand your artistic horizons. Anyway, that's all I have to say today. I hope that you will start to trust yourself better. You will follow your instincts. You will let those happy accidents occur. And when they do occur, you'll just roll with them. Because trust me, everything is better when you do that. It is Zen and the art of art. Thank you so very much for playing with me today, for being part of this. It means the world to me that you will take a moment out of your busy, busy day to listen to me blather on. I hope that you and everyone you know and love have a wonderful, wonderful day.